Defining DeFi, hackathon, Morales and Google. 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 Define hackathon, Morales and Google. Defining define hackathon, Morales and Google. Defining define hackathon, Morales and Google. Defining define hackathon, Morales and Google. 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 Morales and Google.
Greetings, developers, DeFi builders, and hackathon participants. Welcome to another Google Cross Morales Defining DeFi live stream workshop event. We're so excited that you're all here with us today, and we are joined today by Rahat of Polygon. He is works in dev relations with Polygon, and he's going to be showing us today how to build trust through the user experience that we bring to our DeFi visitors with our dapps. So there's actually some things that we can introduce in the way that we design our dapps that help to give a more trusting experience to our users. So that's what we're going to get into here in just a second. I want to welcome Rahat to the stage. Now, once again, I'm Phil, your head of events at Morales. And Rahat, tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome to the stage here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Love working with Morales on these awesome workshops. So like Phil mentioned, I'm from Polygon. I lead the developer relations engineering team. So our team is the ones who go around doing all these workshops on behalf of Polygon, usually at like a hackathon like this, sometimes in person, and just like kind of like building and putting out content on the education side for Web3.
Now, you guys just got back from Bogota recently, am I right?
Yes, we did.
And so I'm sure it's a lot of workshops and training that you guys were doing down there. We're excited to have you back and with us now. Why don't we get right into it? Did you have some slides to share for us?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and present that.
Perfect. Share your screen right there and
Cool.
Take it away, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. So like as mentioned, we're going to be talking today about building trust in DeFi dapps with better UX. And we've already went through the intro, so I won't spend too much time here, but I lead dev relations over at Polygon. Previously been like a front-end engineer as well as a freelance Solidity engineer. And these are just some places you can find me. But a very quick spiel about Polygon, just in case you haven't heard about Polygon before. So Polygon is the leading platform for Ethereum scaling and infrastructure development. So we provide a bunch of different solutions, things like L2 solutions, rollups, optimistic rollups, sidechains, things like that. And we're kind of like aiming to be sort of like a Swiss Army knife for Ethereum scaling and development. So depending on your use case, depending on what type of dApp you're building, we want to provide you different solutions you can use to tailor to your needs rather than having to tailor your solution to a single platform. So that's a little bit about us. Definitely check out the different solutions that we have around. But kind of like diving into things now, we especially like, at Polygon and a lot of different scaling solutions out there, we all talk about adoption through specifically scaling. But scaling is not always going to be enough. It's not going to be like the only thing that's going to help you achieve adoption. You also need to make sure your dApps are usable, right? How quickly can someone get onboarded onto your dApp? How quickly can someone get connected, start using it for whatever reason, whether it's to do some transactions, whether it's to send funds for lending, borrowing, whatever it might be. How easy is it for the user to get to that specific flow in your dApp? So these are some of the questions that you should definitely be asking yourself before you start building your dApp. First is like, how comfortable are your users with connecting their wallet to your dApp? Are they given a choice to connect? This is very important and is going to be one of the first examples that we go over in just a second. What is the onboarding flow for using your dApp? Is it the same as everyone else where, folks are expected to go to some exchange, use some fiat on-ramp and get some, funds maybe for gas and then start using your dApp? Maybe you should rethink that onboarding flow, and we're going to talk about that as well. And lastly, how fast is your dApp? Now, of course, ultimately transactions and speeds will depend on the specific solution or blockchain that you're using. But there are things that you can do to provide an experience on your dApp that makes it feel much faster than it is. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. But we'll start things off kind of like simple. Wallet connections. This is the first connection that a user makes to your decentralized application, right? So on the screen, I just have a very, very kind of like basic implementation of a wallet connect button, right? So this is some React specific code. I come from a front end background, a lot of React, but I'll explain this in case you're not too familiar. This is just a JavaScript function that can be executed when a button is clicked. Essentially what it is doing, it's looking into the browser, looking in the window, and pulling out the Ethereum object in the window. If you're from a Web2 background, you're like, wait, there is no Ethereum object in the window. This exists as long as you have like a browser injected wallet in your browser. So something like MetaMask will automatically inject the Ethereum object into the window. That's why in the next line, I'm doing like a check. Does Ethereum exist? So if Ethereum exists, then I'm going to do a bunch of different things to actually connect to the user's wallet. All of this is done using the Ethers.js npm package. A lot of this is just boilerplate, that stuff that you can copy and paste from the Ethers.js documentation. So there's not a lot going on here, right? What I'm doing here is like, once a user clicks the button, I'm requesting access to their wallet and getting information about their address. If they don't have a wallet, I'm going to alert that, no wallet is detected. So a quick demo of this very basic implementation, what it would look like. Someone goes to a site, hits connect wallet, MetaMask pops up, they connect to a specific account, and now I'm just displaying that account on their page. Very, very simple, but I wanted to just like look at this one simple concept and make sure it's ingrained that this is the flow that your users should be going through. The reason I call that out specifically is because a lot of the times you're going to see other wallet connect patterns that exist out in the world. This is one of them. Again, this is React specific code, but what's happening here is that whenever a specific component or a specific page initially loads, some JavaScript function is going to run, right? So in like vanilla JavaScript, this would just be like on page load, run a JavaScript function. The function here, I'm just referring to that, handle wallet connect, which I showed you over here. I just didn't retype it inside of this entire thing. But the same thing is kind of happening, right? We're still trying to get access to the user's wallet, but we removed one step in the process, which is clicking a button, right? And maybe at first glance, you're just like, hey, that's great. Now users don't have to, click a button and wait and request for, their wallet to be connected. We could just do it automatically. Please don't do this. tweeted this like quite a while ago, but one of my pet peeves is if I'm being asked to connect my wallet as soon as I land on a page, is not a good look. I should be able to look around on your dApp and decide if I want to connect. What is your dApp trying to do? Is this a lending dApp where I want to borrow and lend funds? I should look around and see like what options are available to me before I connect and before I actually use your application. Is this some sort of exchange? What does your UI look like? What pairs are you offering for trading pairs or whatever? What does your app even look like? These are all things that I need to know and understand before I decide to connect my wallet to your dApp. In the case where you decide to do this, and on page load, a handle wallet connection is just happening, what you're doing is removing consent from the user. The user has no idea, what they're actually connecting to. Overall, this promotes really, really bad security practices because we're training users to say, oh, it's okay. You land on a page, you connect without knowing what's really going on. It's not something you want to do as an average everyday user. And some folks try to kind of like justify this with what's called the 3-click rule. Just want to say that this 3-click rule has absolutely no data backing it up at all. There is sort of like this, I guess, urban legend of like the less clicks that you have, if you keep things under 3 clicks, you'll be able to keep your users' attention. There are statistics that support like the time, it takes for a page to load and that affecting the user's, attention, but clicks have nothing to do with it. And the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that not all clicks are created equal, especially if you have folks coming in from like, I guess, maybe traditionally Web 2, they're coming into Web 3, they're already used to logging in. They're already used to, going through some authentication procedure before using an app. And so it's an expected thing on the user side that they should authenticate in some way before using, your application. And it's expected that they'll probably request that. There's no reason to kind of like combat that specific behavior that exists on the internet. So that is just like one thing to keep in mind. The next part of this, your user is connected, right? Your user is, on your website, on your dApp, wherever it is, ready to start transacting. But maybe your dApp doesn't exist on Ethereum mainnet. Maybe it doesn't exist on Polygon mainnet. Maybe you need to make sure that your user can easily switch back and forth, right? One of the loveliest things any dApp can do when I go onto it is if I'm already on the Ethereum mainnet because I was doing something there on another application, and I come here and maybe your application is doing all of its transactions on the Polygon mainnet. Once I connect, MetaMask can give me this little pop-up here that says, oh, do you want to allow this site to switch your network? Because, this specific site is on Polygon. You want to make sure that it's easy as possible for people to do that, to switch networks. You can do that for them, make that request for them once they actually hit that connect wallet button. And this is just like a little bit of a boilerplate thing that you can do. This window.ethereum.request is what you can add into your connect wallet functionality to also switch the network that your user is on. A lot of the times I've seen many dApps where I connect, especially in like hackathon submissions, I've seen like a lot of folks who send me a dApp that might be on a specific network, but don't give me any feedback to let me know that I need to switch to that network now in order to actually use their app. So on the surface, it might look like your app is broken, when it's not. It's just the user's not on the right network. But there needs to be, the first step is like at least giving that person that feedback, like, hey, you're on the wrong network. But you can even bypass that completely and say, look, you're on the wrong network, but I'm going to help you get on the right one. And here's a little bit of code that will actually help you do that. This provides just like a better user experience. You're not leaving your users to figure out why certain things are not using. Even if you like give them that feedback in like a toast or like in a pop-up or something like that, sometimes people don't read. Sometimes people will kind of like overlook that fact. So make it as easy as possible, remove that friction point, and just make sure people can easily get to the right network. Some further considerations to make to improve like the UX of your wallet connections. Number one, don't just focus on browser wallets. My code example, and just for like, the sake of this workshop and to, get through an example, I gave you an example that's specifically connecting to a browser wallet, MetaMask, right? But, people use all types of different wallets. They might be using a mobile wallet. Maybe they're using a hardware wallet. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that your dApps are including all of these different types of people. Not as popular, as browser wallets like MetaMask are. There are people who don't want to use it, who would prefer to use like a mobile wallet or something like that. Let them just, use what they're used to. The next thing, like abstractions are nice. You don't have to code everything, from scratch like this all the time. There are some wonderful abstractions from packages like the Rainbow -Me kit, Wallet Connect, in combination with things like WagMe React hooks, which are great for connecting to wallets much more quickly. They give you reusable, composable functions and hooks that allow you to quickly do that, quickly keep track of what users connected to your dApp. Rainbow -Me even gives you, as well as Wallet Connect, which I think is also built into Rainbow Me, will essentially give you UI components that allow users to just like choose the different types of wallets that they can connect with. Maybe they want to connect to MetaMask. Sure, that's one option. Maybe they want to connect to their mobile wallet. I usually, if I'm using an app for just like a non-work purposes, I'll probably connect on my mobile wallet. That's where I keep my like my address that I do transactions on in like real life. So that's where I would want to make sure I can like come in and use what I'm familiar with. So this is just a way to be like inclusive as possible for the different types of wants and needs people have in wallets. And that third part, again, can't stress that enough. Let users choose to connect. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Cool. So we talked a little bit about wallet connections. I want to talk about waiting. Whenever, a lot of the times when I am, on a workshop, if I'm doing a little bit of live coding, which tends to either go really, really well or really, really poorly, there's no in between. There's always an awkward moment where a transaction has to go through. A transaction has to be completed, finalized, etc., before some UI change happens, right? We can actually use different techniques to distract people from the fact that a transaction needs to go through. And these are things known as optimistic UI patterns, right? So this is a very basic example. After this example, we'll also go into an example implemented out in real life, specifically with Uniswap. But this is like one of the very first dApps I ever created, which was a Pokemon battle between a Charizard and a Lugia. A little bit of background, there's just a smart contract in the background that essentially keeps track of the health of these two Pokemon. And then there's an attack function that allows Charizard to attack. So I'm going to show you what happens here. I use that use flamethrower button, which is going to run the attack function on my smart contract. Pay the gas or whatever. Hit confirm. And you'll see that my transaction is pending, right, in the background. We're waiting for that transaction to finalize. But as it's finalizing, you see the chars are doing a little bit, like a little, small animation of like doing the actual attack. So now you're distracting your user, right? Your user thinks, oh, great, something is happening on this app. This app is actually really fast. You're using optimistic UI patterns. You're changing things on the UI based on some asynchronous action, right? You're waiting for a transaction to go through, but something on your UI changes, letting the user know that this is in process. Like another way of doing this is just like even putting out a pop-up like, hey, look, your transaction is pending. Maybe give them a link to, the Ether scan or the Polygon scan of that specific transaction so they can check on it themselves if they want to. But the important thing here is to give users feedback in every part of the journey. So we're going to go over a little bit of like the code that can power this, and then we'll look at kind of like how Uniswap, the Uniswap UI, and like the different places that they implement this. But this is just a basic connection to a smart contract, right? You grab the address of wherever your contract is deployed. You make sure you have the ABI. If you are unfamiliar with what an ABI is, whenever you compile a smart contract, one of the things you get out of it is this ABI, which is just this large JSON file that essentially lists out all of the different functions available on that smart contract, all the different state variables, available on that smart contract. And so if you're coming from like a Web2 background, one thing to like kind of note here is just like when you're connecting to a smart contract, you're not doing something like making a post request or like a regular HTTP request, like Fetch or Axios. Those things kind of like are not really used in this case. What you're doing is connecting to a smart contract. That ABI is essentially helping you. You're going to use some type of tool such as Ethers, which is the example here again. And Ethers is going to need that ABI. It's going to need the contract address, and it's going to need information about the person that is connecting so that it can fully connect to the contract and execute those functions for you. So this is just some boilerplate code to make sure all of that works. And then I run some functions, right? So I just have an asynchronous function here called attack. And attack does all of the little things with like attacking the other Pokemon and then updating the hit points after the fact. The main things to like kind of keep a note here is like when you're awaiting for something to finish, for something to happen, right before you await, that's when you can make your UI update. That's when I can trigger, the Charizard doing that little animation. That's when I can put in like a loading spinner. That's when I can even just like use one of those like skeleton loading pages to show that, there's something happening. The main thing here, what optimistic UI patterns do is essentially you're letting the user know something is going on, something is happening. Their transfer is, processing, whatever it is. Let the user know that something is going on. Don't just like make them wait and wonder what's happening. Distractions and updates are your friends. That's like really the core kind of like main point that I want you to take away from here. And let's take a look at like how Uniswap kind of like implements this. So here I'm on Uniswap. I want to trade one Matic over to USDC. You'll see that, it's like fetching the price. There was a little tiny spinner at the bottom that, fetches all of the prices and everything like that. And then eventually when I decide, okay, I want to swap, I hit confirm swap, I have the loading spinner. So even though my MetaMask pops up for me to actually confirm the transaction, I still have this loading spinner, going over here, which means like the UI knows that something is happening. Now I get a pop-up that says the transaction is actually submitted. I can view on the Explorer. I can add USDC to my wallet, which is great, like a whole bunch of cool things. And on the top right corner, you'll see I have a pending transaction going through. So again, I can continue using the dApp itself. I know that it is processing. I know that the dApp understands everything is processing. So through every part of like the journey of this transaction, I am given feedback from Uniswap that something is going on, that something is processing, that the app is aware that something is processing, and I just have to wait, and that's fine. So the perception of having a fast app does not have to rely on the transaction going through instantaneously. Where we are with blockchain technology right now, nothing is instant, right? Everything needs to be confirmed. Every transaction needs to go through in some way like that. So these optimistic UI patterns and distractions are going to be what allows your user to understand, okay, something is going on, something is happening, my funds are fine. So ultimately, your distractions and updates are going to happen before, during, and after any asynchronous function calls. I make some right before I make an asynchronous function call, I can update some state saying I'm making the call. During the call, you see some loading spinner, something kind of happening. After the call, whether it's successful, whether there's an error, now I can get some user feedback saying, oh, this went through, this did not go through, etc. The main point, again, I'm just reiterating this over and over, let your user know what's happening. And UX starts, on the front end. And one thing I kind of like forgot to mention, UI and UX are different things. If you like look at this Uniswap demo, the UI is pretty basic, right? It's just a little box. You input some values in a form and you do your transaction, right? It doesn't have like your UI itself does not have to be complex. It does not have to be the most majestic thing in the world to provide a good UX. Generally, I've actually seen some of like the really prettier stuff have poor UX, to be honest. But UI and UX, completely different things. The UI is like how good it looks. And I personally think Uniswap looks pretty good. I like the simplicity of it. But like adding, more complex designs doesn't give your user better experience. So that's one thing just to keep in mind as well. So now going beyond the front end, right? We talked about different things you can do to optimize on the front end to make sure that your users are connecting their wallets properly, safely, in a way that they consent to. But there are further things that we can do in the back end to make the experience a little bit better. So we're going to be talking about how to use Polygon and leveraging some of its benefits to supercharge your dapps UX. And one of the coolest ways, in my opinion, that this happens is doing something called Gasless meta transactions. So this is going to be going into onboarding users, allowing users to start using your dApp as soon as possible and right away. I want to kind of like bring to your attention one thing that exists sort of, I guess, in Web 2 that doesn't quite exist in Web 3, which is a try before you buy. Do a transaction before fully committing to, bringing in some funds and something like that, some small transaction. In the case of like an NFT mint, maybe something like that, maybe you have some like token gated community, maybe like allowing a free mint of an NFT that burns or expires after a certain amount of time. All of these things are possible, but no matter what, generally you need to have some amount of gas in your wallet some amount of funds in your wallet before you start transacting because of those gas costs, right? And this is not the greatest onboarding experience for somebody who is completely new to Web3, who may like be under the impression like, oh, I have to go through this exchange, I have to, add fiat, I have to get all of this money, I have to have money just to even start using your product. Why can't I just try something out? And I've always really liked, in my head, I've not really seen a lot of people do this, but like this concept of like, can we do some small free transaction, right? Whether it's like it could be like a demo swap, maybe. I'm not 100% sure how this would work within a DeFi app. I would love to see, folks who are, building in this hackathon come up with cool and innovative ways. One of the things that I thought of is like, some type of token gated access or swap, or some access to like some services on your app, where somebody could mint a free NFT and like start using some parts of your app or something like that. Totally up to you on how you want to actually onboard users, but let's try to like eliminate one of the things that a lot of folks who are new to Web3 don't quite like about our overall ecosystem. We're going to talk a little bit about EIP 712, which is all about signing transactions with structured signed data. We're going to talk about how you take that signed structured data, send it to a relayer, such as OpenZeppelin Defender or Biconomy. What that relayer does in the background is it actually takes that request, wraps it inside of a transaction, fills it up with the necessary gas to actually execute, and then sends it to the contract to execute on behalf of the user. This allows a seamless and gasless way of just trying out an app. So signing, which is the EIP 712, built on this whole like don't trust but verify, right? You have some specific JSON object, some data structure with information about that is needed for this transaction, and you sign it on your front end. Whenever you sign a transaction on your front end, you're usually using your private keys to do some encryption with it. So this happens off chain. Never want to use your private keys on chain. But this like proves that an owner, like someone who owns these private keys, has signed this data, and you don't have to trust that they are who they say they are, because that they've signed it, meaning they have access to the private keys. It's them. The Ether's implementation for this is signer._sign type data. That's the method you can take a look at in the Ether's documentation for actually like creating this request and this like full object. The reason it has like this little underscore in it is because it is, I think, theoretically still experimental. Eventually you'll be able to use it without that underscore, but I believe it'll always be an option for the underscore to be there, just for like backwards compatibility. But from a JavaScript front end, you just create the signature and you send it to like some HTTP endpoint for a relayer. So the relayer, again, is just waiting for that request. You would load up that relayer with some funding for gas, right? Maybe some amount of Matic, some amount of ETH, whatever it is. And some examples of these relayers are OpenZeppelin Defender, Biconomy, and Ethereum Gas Station Network. We're just making requests to these relayers with our signatures. A cool kind of like implementation of this is done by Lens Protocol, which is also from Aave. They've done this like really, really well, where you interact with like the entire Lens protocol. Everything is on chain on the Polygon blockchain, and you never have to pay any gas because everything is paid for by a relayer in the background, causing a really, really good user experience for anybody, because no one has to worry about having extra funds for fees. No matter how low the fees get, they add up. No matter how low the fees are, you still have to have funds for them. So removing that friction point is probably one of the biggest ways of like gaining some sort of Web3 adoption, especially for folks who are new to the space, even if it's just like removing fees for like some initial amount of transactions that can be done in your app, because people like trying things out at a discount. It's a psychological thing. It's a way to just like get users to like try before they fully commit to like always using your app. This is going to improve your overall UX. UX is not just a front-end issue. Like we just went through here, there are different layers to it. There are different things we can do at the smart contract level. There are further things you can do beyond. There's new EIPs that have been like in the works and are like gaining more popularity now on like account abstraction and things like that. I haven't really brought that into this talk, but I thought I would mention it because I know there's just a lot of work being done to improve the overall UX of like the Ethereum ecosystem. And definitely recommend keeping up with those EIPs. I believe the EIP is 4337. I think so. I'm just like Google searching it on the side to make sure I'm not lying. Yes, EIP 4337 is definitely one you should one you should look into as that like kind of evolves. I think it's still kind of like in the early stages, so like it's not nothing set in stone there, but definitely take a look at it for account abstraction and like just improving the UX of like how people use wallets, how people interact with dApps. I think we're at kind of like the cusp of like really introducing like some phenomenal UX improvements in the blockchain space, in the Ethereum ecosystem. So those are things that you can definitely take a look at and keep an eye on. But if we go back to like this specific example of like doing, gasless transactions, this becomes economically viable on a blockchain like Polygon. Like you could do this on mainnet on Ethereum, but like what happens when you're at a bull cycle and your gas fees are huge, even though you're paying it for the user? Do you really want to pay, $50 or more per transaction, for your user? And it's not feasible. So definitely looking at, solutions like Polygon to make this economically viable is one thing I'd recommend. But yeah, just to wrap up again, just a little bit more information about me. If you ever want to chat some more about any of the things that I've gone over during this workshop, during this talk, these are some places you can find me: Twitter, and GitHub, if you ever want to look at some of the code examples. And if you enjoyed this workshop, please do let us know. We're at 0x Polygon Devs on Twitter, and here's mine. And thank you again to Phil and the Morales team for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And thank you so much for presenting a workshop to us today. I had a few different things that I was thinking as you were going over it, especially with respect to gasless transactions. You make some excellent points about gasless transactions. It can be a great way to encourage people to try out your dApp. You want to be a little careful with that, though, in my experience. When it comes to experienced DeFi users, we want to know where the money is coming from.
Yeah.
And if you say right in there, or maybe you even have a switch that says gasless and you can turn it on, but then you have somewhere in your documentation that it explains what's going on there. That's important too, because someone like me, I don't want your dApp to lose money because it has all sorts of gasless functions, because if it loses money and I'm involved with it, then I'm losing money. So I want it to make sense at the same time. It's almost like a balancing act.
Right.
It feels like sometimes, to find out, what do I make free without it both costing me too much and making the dApp not make as much sense as it would otherwise.
Definitely. No, I love that point. It's something I haven't really considered, so I love that point of view. Just having that in there too. But yeah, I think gasless transactions are probably really good for like onboarding new users, but for like the users like yourself, who are like kind of like more experienced and like have been in this space for a while, who like understand why we need gas and all those all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on the other hand, if a dApp were to present to me a UX or a user experience where it says, deposits are free, there's a 20-day lockup, and you will pay gas when you withdraw, that kind of makes sense to me, because I can understand how, all right, it's pooling all the assets. Those assets are earning a return through lending, let's say lending in this case. And then some of those lending returns are being used to pay gas for new users. Oh, it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't you do something like that? And feel free, if that sounds like an idea you want to try out in your dApp, all of my ideas are free to use. No guarantee that it'll be the best idea, but you're welcome to use mine. Ideas are free when they come from me.
I would actually love to see something like that implemented. That would be really cool.
Now, we do have time for additional questions in the chat. Have one on a question on the security of Polygon. Now, we did a previous workshop where we were talking about multi-sig and Polygon. We're specifically covering Gnosis multi-sig wallet. I encourage you to go back and watch that video if you haven't seen it already, because that's going to cover a lot of those things. Now, this might be a good time for us to talk about just briefly for people who are new to Polygon. Polygon shares some security with the Ethereum mainnet. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the way that kind of works is if you're referring to like the Polygon proof of stake blockchain, which is probably what most people are using right now. So the underlying architecture of like how that works is like you have like the Matic sidechain, kind of like that's where you do all your interactions. That's where you connect your wallet, where your apps are deployed, etc. And on the Ethereum mainnet, there is a smart contract that like holds like the current state of the data that is on the Polygon side, and in the middle between like the Matic chain as well as like the Ethereum network, you have what's called a plasma checkpoint layer, where like periodically it's looking at the current state of like the Matic chain and then saving that state in a hashed value to that smart contract that exists on Ethereum. So kind of like a way to kind of like look at it is like, a safe point in like a video game right before a boss battle, right? If you screw up in that boss battle, you can always go back, right? So these checkpoints exist to make sure that like the data is backed up on Ethereum. So it transforms into like just being like a side chain into an architecture called like a commit chain, which derives a little bit more security from Ethereum.
Absolutely. The great stuff there. Now, I understand that, what is it? The ZK EVM am I calling that correct?
Yep.
Is under development right now. And that would introduce even more security guarantees and advancements as well. So I know that's not the one that most of us are using right now, but is definitely something to look forward to for the future. I hope that answers everybody's question about security on Polygon chain. I feel safe to say that it's actually one of the more secure experimental blockchain solutions that we're using today. Is a weird thing to say, but that's where we're at. I mean, this is emerging tech. So if you wanted me to give a guarantee of complete security on any blockchain, including Bitcoin, I probably couldn't do it.
Right.
But that's not the game we're playing here. We're building the future. Once it's fully secure, then it's mass adoption time. And we'll be on to other things actually at that point.
Yeah, it's still wild to think that Ethereum is only like 7 years old still, so we haven't actually been around for that long.
That's absolutely true. We're getting into a different topic there, but I'll just say briefly, this is a point I haven't made on this channel before, so I'll bring it up as we're closing down. It's a really exciting time to be in Web3 if you're here with us, because we are in, a short-term period. If you go from the beginning of DeFi or the beginning of Web3 to where we are now, when they talk about long-term investments in traditional finance, they're talking about 50-year time spans.
Yeah,
50 years. What does that mean? That means that Bitcoin, the longest-standing cryptocurrency, isn't even old enough to be a long-term investment. It's not the best long-term investment of all time. It's the best short-term investment of all time. The best long-term, well, that'll come later. And when we reach that long-term time horizon with the interoperability partners that we're working with the amazing blockchains that we're working with, that's going to be a whole new world. So now what I'll remind everybody of, just to close us out here, is, so where does the security come from? The security comes from us, the developers. Yep. There's certain security guarantees that we get from the ecosystems that we work with and that are inherited. And there are certain security guarantees that we need to build in for our customers. So never rely on just the ecosystem you're building within to provide you security. You need to build that in yourself as well.
Absolutely. Love that point.
Well, Rahat, thank you so much for joining us here today. Wonderful workshop. I'm going to go ahead and close us out here, but we will be meeting in Gathertown in only 15 minutes. So click the link into the description. I'll be over there. Rahat, you're welcome to join us if you have some extra time. We'll do an extended question and answer over there, and also talk about what you guys are building. If you want to, bring forward stories, questions, whatever you guys have, we're there for you and there to talk. So see everybody there in a little bit.
See y'all.